The last method for retopologizing your mesh that I'm going to show you is the Appended ZSphere retopology method. Now that's a mouthful and it can be sort of a bit scary, and it is a sort of a process that scares a lot of people off. In fact, I haven't used this method for like ages because I just thought that it was too complicated, and I just liked the topology brush where I could just sort of draw around my mesh and just sort of draw polygons that way. But I've found that it's a lot more robust and it's actually a lot easier than it first seemed to be. The first thing that you need to do is come under your subtool menu and click on the Append subtool button. And we're going to select a ZSphere. So the ZSphere is way down there. That's because we're using this. We're using the UDK scale, which means that everything that's brought in is sort of basically 1 unit in size. The positioning of the ZSphere doesn't really matter that much, but we should really have it inside the mesh. So I'm just going to put it more or less central to the pelvis area, which is going to be similar to where we would put the root bone if we were doing an animation rig in Maya. It's also a bit small. I'm just going to tap X to make sure that my symmetry is on, and I'm going to go to scale, and I'm going to scale this up just so that we can see it and we can find it easily. And yeah, that's big enough just so that we can see where it is. Now, once we have a ZSphere appended to our tool as a subtool, and that's important. That will make it a lot easier later on. If we come down to topology, we have this edit topology button. Now if we hold down Control, you can see all of this text, all of these things that you think, oh crap, I've got to remember all of this now, and it just seems like it's too hard. But all you really need to know is that once you've done this a couple of times, and once you've watched a video like this, all of these points are basically just sort of handy hints. It's a handy sort of cheat sheet of all the things that you need to do and need to know how to do until you learn them off by heart. So do not be scared by this this massive tooltip, because I'm going to show you how to do most of these things, and it's actually quite handy to have this sort of control hover menu there while you're learning this. So with the ZSphere selected, I'm going to click on Edit Topology. Now make sure that you also go back to draw mode, and now you can click around your object. Any subtool which is currently active can be drawn on. And so you see it sticks to the surface just the same as the topology brush. Now I am actually going to switch off my transparency just so that I can get a better sort of view of the object that I'm drawing. Now you can see that I have closed off this area here. Now if I wanted to click on this this point in order to close this polygon here, once I click on it, you can see that we actually jumped across from the last new point that we drew, and we don't want that to happen. If you want to draw from one point to the other, it's very simple. Just hold down Control and click, and that selects whichever point you're hovering over. And that is basically the trickiest thing to the trickiest thing about this tool. Everything else is just so simple once you get into the knack of just using your control key in order to select the next point that you want to go on from. And so it's just control, click, and just draw, control, click, and you can draw out like this. And I want to make this sort of a central line like that. And say we want to close up this, control and click there, and close that up. And so you can see that once you get into the knack of, or get into the habit, pick one, of using control to select the point that you want to carry on from, everything else is simple. And you can see that it's a very quick method for creating this sort of mesh. And I'm just going to go down there and there. And so you can see we've built up these polygons in next to no time. This method is a lot faster once you get the hang of it, and a lot more robust than the topology brush, because you can build up quite a big mesh, and your computer isn't struggling to remember all of the points on those curves, and so you are basically giving your computer a lot less work to do. Now, if you want to go from a place that you've been working on to somewhere else, say you've built up polygons here, but you actually want to start working on the arm here, the forearm here, you can click straight across to there, but that will cause problems. What I recommend you do is you click on a point that you're eventually going to delete. So we'll click just a random point on the bicep, then we're going to click our first point here, and we're going to click a polygon here. Now the reason that we have this spacer point here is that if we want to separate out this mesh from that mesh, we can alt-click in order to remove points. Again, alt is a very standard tool for all of the brushes and tools in ZBrush. So now we can just control-click on one of these points, and we can just go around our object like this. And I will close that off. And okay, control and click. And that. And close that loop. And you can see now the control clicking really comes in handy. And there we go. So we've now created these sorts of bands around the wrist there. Now, if we wanted to split polygons, for example, maybe this band across the waist, we want to introduce more geometry here so that when the character bends left and right and forward and back, there is the geometry there to cover that. We can simply click, and I'll just Control Z. If we control click in the or control click on a point that is on this line, and then click in the center of this line, we have introduced a new point. And then it's just a matter of just left mouse clicking around our object like that. And even though that has dipped into the surface, there is actually a line there. And you can see that sort of coming across like that. I think. Hang on. I'll just make sure. Control click. And there. Maybe there's an extra point there. I'm just going to Alt click that and Control click, come to the center, Control click, come to the center. That's curious. Okay. Maybe there's a point there. And now if we click up there, maybe that fixed it. Okay, I think what it's doing is it's actually clicking onto the ZSphere. So we can just with the Alt key delete that line. If we come across here now, there we go. So yeah, there are sort of, you know, occasional things that are frustrating, but you'll find a lot more of those sorts of fiddly things with the topology brush. And sometimes the lines just won't work, or they'll just sort of delete out and they'll go off into space. Now, every so often, and it hasn't happened so far, but every so often you will sort of be drawing a polygon and suddenly the line or the polygon will shoot down to this point here, which is usually the origin of your world. If that happens, don't panic. All you need to do, and I recommend doing this right now, is Alt clicking on this point so that we just erase that point. And that's just sort of a leftover point from when we brought in our ZSphere. I'm not sure why it does that, but sometimes it does. So just remember that and just sort of be ready to just erase that when the time comes. Now, when you want to actually have a look at your mesh, and for this I might turn the transparency back on, all you have to do is, it's the same as the adaptive skin preview or the unified skin preview, is that you just hit the A key. And so hitting A, you can see that the mesh is sort of drawn up like this, and it seems to have closed off the holes on that that tube there, which is a bit strange. But anyway, and tap it again to sort of bring that back. Now, you can also create a thickness for this object. So if we bring this up, and I'll make it sort of up to there, and then tap A, you can see that we do have some thickness to our objects. And if I turn on polyframe, you can see that we actually have an edge group around our object. And if I do it again, there you go, the colors are a little bit more obvious that time. Now, this is strange. I think it could be because it's only basically 5 polys around, and so it probably closes that off as a 5-sided polygon. So what I might do is just Control click over here, click in the middle, come down here, Control click here, click in the middle and come down, just to give it more of that sort of you'll notice that when I control clicked and clicked in the middle of these polys, it drops the point right in the middle of that line, which could be actually within the surface of your mesh. Another good thing about the ZSphere method is that you can actually move these points afterwards. And so all we have to do is just sort of move it back and forth, and the move will stick to the surface, just the same as if you had drawn that point. And so if we just move these around, you can see that those points are now up on the surface. And if you wanted to, you could sort of do some very weird and wacky things like superhero gloves by dragging these points off the surface like so. And so with that, if we tap A, you can see that, yeah, there are now enough points that it doesn't register that as another polygon, and we have this sort of this object sticking out from our surface. Now this highlights another thing to keep in mind with this method, and it'll probably show up better if we actually bring this skin thickness up to something like, okay, 1 seems to be the maximum that we can bring it to, but we'll take it to the maximum and we'll hit A. And you can see that the surface over here has come out a great sort of distance, that 1 unit distance from the surface, but this central chest plate and this side have gone in. So in order to fix up the body and this side, we'll take this down to -1, hit A, which gives our chest plate the sort of coming out from the surface that we want, and also this side. But this side is now not so good. I haven't really figured out a way beyond this. If you wanted, if there were shoulder pads, you can draw a set of polygons joining them, and then the normals will be unified, which means that the direction of the thickness will be the same. But then you've got a bridge of polygons to deal with. I just recommend that you either switch off X symmetry for one side and then using your subtool master mirrored across, or just draw with the X symmetry on and then just delete the sides that are incorrect and then sort of mirror it across with the subtool master. If there is a way to sort of unify these normals from left to right, and it might have been fixed in the next version of ZBrush, but if it hasn't, but you know of the option in order to make that happen, please leave a comment and let us know how. Now the only other thing that I can think to say is with our topology, I'll just switch that off, and if we okay, if we click that on, we switch off edit topology. If we switch the edit topology button off again, we finalize our topology, and switching it on again goes back to the editing mode. So now we have a new topology, which is actually part of this ZSphere subtool. Now another interesting part with this is if we have multiple objects. So I'll just go back to our Dynamesh base here, and what I'll do is, going back to draw, I'm just going to draw an additional item onto our character. So I'm just going to draw a mask on his shoulder there, and this isn't very sort of, this is just I think it is extract actually. Yes, extract. Okay, and then we let's see if we click on that. Yep, that's a good enough size. So we'll extract that mask out, hit accept, and that is now a new subtool, those sorts of shoulder pads, and you can see them there. Now if we go back to our ZSphere and we go back down to our topology and click on edit topology, and I'll just go from here, so control click to select that. I'm going to control click just a bridging point, and then I'm going to click on this shoulder pad, and you can see that we are actually building, and I'll just remove this bridging point, we are actually building on this shoulder pad, not on the skin underneath. And this is really handy. I'm not sure that you can do this with the topology brush, but you can see that anything which is visible in our subtools can be drawn upon. And so I'm just going to finish off the poly strip here. There. And now, if we wanted to, we can actually hide that shoulder pad, and we will draw a bridging point and then draw on the shoulder, and I'm just going to remove that bridging point. And now we can actually, if we're if we're skillful enough, we can actually draw. I will get it right, honestly. Control click. We can actually draw under our mesh that we had. That is based on the shoulder pad. And so you can see that we can have these very sort of overlapping ways of designing our characters, which will really come in handy later on. And so yeah, you can see that we can create mesh based on the visibility of all the other subtools, not just the subtool that we have active and are using the topology brush on. And so you can see that we have an incredible amount of don't worry about that, it's just treating that as a loop, but you can have an incredible amount of versatility with this appended ZSphere method. So don't rule it out as a method, and this is probably what I'm going to be using for the completion of my UDK character. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to comment, like and subscribe and all of that sort of commercial stuff that I have to remember now. Thanks a lot.